This morning, we're joined by the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, also Democratic presidential candidate, which is why he's in Iowa, Chris Dodd. Good morning, Senator Dodd.
Good morning, George.
So you heard Chairman Bernanke there. He wouldn't say that a recession is coming, but he did say that he expected growth to be sluggish into the next year. Do you believe that we're headed for a recession, and is there anything that can be done to cushion the blow?
Well, it's certainly pointing in that direction. We hope that's not the case, but there are many people who watch this minute to minute and would have drawn that conclusion. Some even predicting a far greater likelihood than I would at this juncture. And certainly the markets reacted, I think, to Chairman Bernanke's comments here about slow growth. So we watched the worst decline here in the last 5 years in the markets over the last week. Predictions that the housing sales will fall, I think it's 2% this year, 4% next year. That's the first time since the Great Depression we've had 2 successive years of predictions of housing sale declines. All of that information, the price of a barrel of oil getting precariously close to $100 a barrel. Here, the decision, or at least the announcement by a relatively low-level Chinese official that they may look elsewhere in their reserves other than the dollar. All of these factors, I think, have contributed to the general sense that we may be heading in the wrong direction economically.
So what can be done right now to turn that around?
Well, I think it certainly, at energy prices, my hope would be the administration would be doing far more than just sort of sitting back. The impression just sort of sitting back and not really dealing very effectively here with the producers of energy here to reduce that price. That's staggering. The cost of that is tremendous. Out here in the heartland of the country here, you're looking at prices of gasoline that are just going to make it difficult for people to get along. Home heating oil prices, the prediction will be very, very high this year. That's one first step, certainly. Getting a better handle on the fiscal matters of the country. I mean, look, we're not going to talk about Iraq too much this morning, but clearly $10 billion a month, $2 billion a week here, the drain on this thing here, the fiscal problems of the country, the amount of debt that's being accumulated, and so large a portion of it being held offshore, giving people like the Chinese who manipulate their currency, as we all know here, a tremendous advantage and weakens us economically as well. That's something we need to be dealing with. And obviously the mortgage crisis here and the liquidity issues are all part of this as well. And more action here, I think, is necessary.
Well, that's what I wanted to drill down on, because you are the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. You have jurisdiction over these banks that have written off, what, $64 billion in loans so far this year. And it looks like next year, as a lot of these adjustable rate mortgages are reset, that we could be facing a wave of foreclosures. Is there anything more you can do to help prevent that?
Well, we met back in April with the major stakeholders, George, to get them to do to try and have workouts here. There's a sizable number of people, in my view, here who could stay in their homes, provided the lending institution will work it out for them. I was terribly disappointed to hear when Moody's assessed that despite that call and their willingness to do so back earlier this spring, that only 1% of these homeowners had actually had some workouts arranged for them. I would like to see far more aggressive about that. I don't want to see, as we have in this state here in Iowa, 6,000 people in the first quarter were in foreclosure. That numbers are equal that number the second quarter. In fact, the largest number of foreclosures in the country since the statistics have been kept for the last 55 years. So workouts could really do an awful lot to save a number of those people there, which I'm hoping we can work on. Secondly, we need to get the Fed now, they're close to doing this, and that is issuing regulations as a result of the HOPA legislation, which was adopted in 1994. And this is one of the major reasons why this fell. We didn't have any cops on the beat here. This was going on here, an aggressive pattern. We've now learned that the Fed was aware of this problem 3.5 years ago, and despite legislation on the books, did nothing that they should have been doing to protect consumers against the deceit and fraud that went on. So we're trying to fix that. That hardly deals with the problem today as it exists, but at least it minimizes it from happening in the future. Lastly, I just mentioned this, liquidity, liquidity, liquidity. Here, we're trying to get the administration to recognize that lifting the portfolio limits of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac would do an awful lot more here. They've done some, they need to do more, in my view. That could offer a great deal of hope here to try and ease this, ease the problem here of the mortgage crisis.
Let me turn to foreign policy for a second. You heard Secretary Rice there. She said that your concerns about the Kyle Lieberman resolution are simply misplaced, that this is not a resolution that authorizes military action. And in fact, as you heard her, she said that the administration is putting many carrots on the table, trying to get Iran to the negotiating table.
Well, I'm encouraged by that. I heard her say that as well. It's just that I've been down this road before, all of us have here, and there just seemed to be a pattern of behavior here. You know, burn me once, your fault, burn me twice, my fault, in a sense, and here we go again with resolutions followed by pronouncements by the administration, which seem to mirror exactly the language in the Kyle Lieberman proposal here. And many of us are concerned, not just myself, Dick Lugar, the former chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Chuck Hagel, Jim Webb, the former Secretary of the Navy in the Reagan administration, Joe Biden and myself, all of us here expressed real concerns about this, the language of that resolution. And all of the negotiating language, the diplomatic language, the sanctioned language, which was included in the Gordon-Smith bill back in April, was all stripped out of that resolution. That caused a lot of us to have great concern about what the intentions and purposes were, and we thought it was unwise to adopt that. 6 or 7 days later, the administration issued statements that almost mirrored exactly the language of that resolution. You'll excuse us if we feel worried and burned by an administration that in the past has used those resolutions as a justification for going forward. Now, I hope that, in fact, we're going to do what the Secretary talked about this morning. That's the idea. Get to that negotiating table, see what can be achieved through that vehicle.
Let me turn to the presidential campaign. Senator Clinton's been fighting a mini controversy over the last 24 hours of whether or not her campaign was planting questions at town meetings in Iowa. One of your colleagues out on the campaign trail, Senator John Edwards, compared that to President Bush.
George Bush goes to events that are staged, where people are screened, where they're only allowed to ask questions if the questions are favorable.
How big a deal is this?
Well, it's probably a big deal here because people don't, I mean, these house parties and town hall meetings, these are terrific vehicles. You've got to sit down and people want to drill down into you. They really want to know your views on various issues. If they discover, in a sense, that these are orchestrated events, then I think that's going to upset people here. There's a great deal of pride about how these caucuses are run and the process leading up to the actual vote, where people fully expect you to sit down in rooms with 20, 30, 40 people. They don't want a speech. They're willing to listen to your views for 5, 10, 15 minutes. But the next hour and a half, they expect you to answer their questions about domestic and foreign policy issues. The idea that this is a contrived setting, been orchestrated and set up ahead of time, I think would hurt you here.
Finally, we're just about out of time, but there was a poll that came out in Quinnipiac poll over the weekend that showed Connecticut voters still think you're doing a great job as senator, majority approval, but by a majority 57 to 26, they don't think you'd make a good president, and 70% want you to drop out of this presidential race. Are you worried that this campaign is costing you with your constituents?
No, not at all. And again, look, you know, there's like two different worlds. You're in Iowa and New Hampshire. You get a clear sense out here, George, this is very much open here. Almost 82% of the likely caucus goers in 54 days have not made up their mind for whom they're going to vote. If you read the national media here, you'd think the race was over with. This was down to 1 or 2 candidates, and the rest of us weren't even in the race. That's not as it's playing out here in Iowa or in New Hampshire, for that matter. So I'm very enthusiastic about where things are. And obviously, I've been away from the House, from my home state, a lot for the last year or so, and I understand people's reactions to that. But I'm heartened by the fact that still a good, strong majority in my state believe I'm doing a good job as their senator, and my hope is to do even a better job for them as their president. So I look forward to winning the caucuses here.
Senator Dodd, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.